So March 2020, the band has been on a forced hiatus because of James being in rehab, and then the pandemic is declared on my birthday. Where's your head at that moment? How are you, like, what's going on? What are you feeling in relation to where the band is at? Because there's already what's going on, and then this pandemic. So bring us through where you're at that moment.
Well, in all honesty, it felt like where we were at some kind of monster, because, just whenever someone experiences something that's like, just life changing, life moving, you kind of have to just kind of accept the fact that you don't know what's going to happen once this person returns. It's like you don't know how the process might change them. And so it's just like when James went off to rehab and then COVID hit. I mean, that was like a double whammy, and it looked like the future was very, very bleak. And I didn't want to just sit there and just wonder about the unknown, or just succumb to something that's so freaking unpredictable. I wasn't going to just sit there and just ruminate and ask questions that I knew there were no answers for. And so I turned to my partner in crime, Rob Trujillo, my musical partner in crime, and my soul brother. And we had a long discussion, and we decided, whatever happens, him and I we're gonna just stay connected through all this. Because we connect on a lot of different levels. Musically, personally, surfing, whatever. It's a lot of different levels. And we had a long conversation, about 45 minutes or so. And at the end of that conversation, he said, "Kirk, this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to stay positive and stay creative. And that's what you should do too." And I thought to myself, that sounds so simple yet so beautiful, and that's what I'm going to do. And I stayed positive, And for me, being positive is picking up my guitar every day, playing guitar with an eye to writing music for the future, And that's a very, very positive sort of practice that I can rely on to bring me to a good place, pretty much, all the time, every time. Because that's what I used to do when I was a kid, and I just didn't know how to feel it. I didn't know how to deal with certain things. I'd pick up my guitar, and all of a sudden I was brought to a better place. So, good. I had my fucking goals. So I sat there and I did that. Wrote a ton of music. A lot of it ended up, on this album. A lot of it ended up on my solo album, and a lot of it, I still have. And I'm thinking, yeah, what do I do with all this music? But I do have a ton of ideas, and I know Rob has a ton of ideas too. And man, some of the music that Rob Trujillo has written in the last couple of years has been really freaking great, And I've witnessed him writing this stuff right in front of me. I'm going, Rob's brilliant stuff.
I mean, it's impossible, I think, to not look at both of your work on this record. We'll talk about your work and not think about how much the jams that you worked on so much in Europe, on the stadium tour, how much that must have helped foster the trust to be optimistic and to follow what Rob's offering in terms of advice. I mean, do you feel that all the work you did back then helped form the platform of trust for you to instantly be like, this is my man. I trust him.
Yeah. I mean, our relationship has been put to the test numerous times. It's challenging being in any band, and to maintain good relationships through that is also a challenge too. But can be done. We're a good example of that. I mean, we're 40 years into this. We're a brotherhood. But just what the level that I couldn't connect with Rob musically goes really, really deep, because him and I come from basically the same musical place. You know, we grew up around funk, R&B, soul, jazz. You know, this is classical music. You know, Latin music. And I was exposed to this type of music from the time I was like 5 or 6 years old, you know, till basically, you know, it just continued. But you know, growing up in the early '70s, there's so much of that music everywhere in the Bay Area and on the radio. And I know there was a lot of it down in SoCal too, and on the radio. So we basically grew up listening to the same stuff. You know, and we have the same influences, a lot of the same grooves. I can reference, like, you know, obscure 70s funk songs, and he knows what I'm talking about. And I love that, you know. Same with me. He's like, you know this song? Of course I know that song. It's a killer song. We jam, and we jam. There's no limits on the types of music that we can play. And him and I have played all sorts of types of music. We played jazz, blues, country, polka, weird gypsy jazz, weird like Eastern European folk stuff. I mean, you know, French pop, Dutch pop, you know, I mean, you know, top 10, new wave, punk. We've played it all, him and I. And, you know, it's amazing because we've done it in a way that we feel has been convincing. You know, we've brought our musicianship to it and like played it convincingly and from the heart. And, you know, that just being put in a weird musical situation and then say, okay, I'm in a difficult musical situation. I'm not really comfortable. Now play from the heart. That's a tall order. And, you know, it's asking a lot, but it's doable, but you need to commit, you know. And sometimes him and I would commit to a song that we'd be playing in 24 hours, and it'd be like really, really like, you know, complicated in terms of like, you know, jazz chords and the arrangement. But we would sit there and we would play it like, you know, 30 times over a course of like, you know, 2 hours, and then go into our hotel rooms and work on it, and then come back together again and work on it more until we really felt like we had it, you know. And we would work on those duets literally up to like an hour before we go on stage, and just to make sure we both knew exactly what each one of us were going to do on stage. And you know, we grew a lot musically from those duets. A lot.
First and foremost, did you feel more trusted in the process of working on this project? And if so, how much of that do you think was down to the other two looking and seeing what you and Rob did on those jams?
I don't know if so much trust comes into it, you know? You know, like always, when it's come time to start coming up with songs, you know, and music, I mean, you know, it's really if you show up with music or not, and you know, come hell or high water, you know, it doesn't matter how you've come up with that music. It's just whether you just fucking show up to the table with music or not.
So let me ask you from another angle. Do you feel that as you were developing those early riffs, as you're coming up with those ideas, as you're starting to send the stuff to everyone, do you feel that maybe on the other side of that line, or the balance, the band, whatever, do you feel that maybe people's ears were slightly more open to hearing what you were sending than before? Or again, was that not really the feeling you got?
You know, I think my you know, my prevailing kind of like feeling and attitude is, you know, when I write a certain piece of music, you know, and I'm confident about it, and I'm confident about its potential and its ability, and you know, the possibilities behind it, you know, that piece of music speaks for itself. You know, and I can act like a fucking, you know, irresponsible, immature, like, jerk, asshole. But if I'm holding the fucking riff for Enter Sandman, that riff is going to be the fucking priority. It isn't fucking, how I'm acting. We'll deal with how I'm acting later. It's this fucking riff that's a priority right now. and so, having said that, if I have a piece of music or a riff that I'm really super confident in, I know from my heart, from my head, from my gut, it's really instinctual. I just know. And I think, that could be said for both James, Lars, and Rob. When we have a piece of music, you just fucking know that, yeah, there's something here, and we can take this, fucking, put it on the train and see where the train goes,
This riff has been talked about a lot already, but I mean, it does serve to say that the 72 Seasons riff, which I've since heard you say you wrote first thing in the morning, which is interesting because it actually sounded like a sunrise to me. No, it did, but it's almost like sunrise, and there was a little bit of almost Crazy Horses from the Osmonds in there, like and a little bit of like Judas Priest. You got another thing coming, like it resonated sun. It made me think of sun, and anyway, I'm using up time.
It definitely is
but it screamed out.
It definitely is, a riff that has a lot of forward motion, a lot of forward energy. It's just like, it's something that I think that anyone, who likes this type of music can just instantly recognize. It's just like, oh yeah, this is fun.
It's fucking brilliant. It's a great riff. It's a great riff. It's the riff. I listened to the record like 8 times before I did any of these interviews. Like I was coming in, out, and that was the riff that burned in my head. That was one of the main ones. That and in Emerada. But let me ask you about the process as well here. Obviously, and Fiddleman and everyone have gone into the technical side of this. Like, we have to have Jason Gossman help out. We have to have studios. Emotionally, was it easier to write knowing that you weren't going to be like, oh, I have to go in and I have to sit physically in front of, Greg or Lars or whatever, the physical space? And I know that we've had these conversations off air. Well, you and I agree on the importance of like physical energy. Like we're in the same room here. This is a different interview than it would be if we were doing it on Zoom. Mm-hmm. It just feels that much better. So take that out of it. Does it make it easier and free you up more to feel freer to do what you're doing when you're working on Metallica music or on music in general? There's
an energy that comes along with just being present with another person. I always believe that you take two minds and you put them together. It doesn't equal 2 minds. It actually equals 4 minds. You add another mind in there, and you're now up to like 9 minds. You add another mind in there, and you're up to like 18 or 24 possibly. Seriously, I seriously think that. There's something that happens when you get 2 people together in collaboration, and then something happens. It's bigger than the both of you, and then it just grows exponentially from there. And that's something that we have known about and recognized for a long time, and know the importance of all of us being in the same room doing what we need to do together, whether it's writing, rehearsing, recording, performing, or whatever. It all comes together when the 4 of us are in the same room. We can do a lot of work, individually, and it works out, but the crowning achievement is always when we're all in that room together and all the work is done, and then we're playing the songs and executing it in real time, and in the moment. And that's when we look at each other and we shake our heads, and it's like, yeah, this is right, the recognition is there.
Do you think, and it's impossible to look at this project without the pandemic being a backdrop. It really is. It's impossible. But do you think with everything that the pandemic brought, from, distancing to not being able to do stuff and so on. Do you think it's made everyone appreciate that chemistry more and appreciate the differences that each of you have, and maybe not try and look at the differences, but look at the commonality?
Well, I mean, that's something we've been telling each other for a long time. It's the differences that actually make us interesting, as a whole. And it's just like, I'll tell you one thing that COVID did that I think it was pretty important, is that when it came to a point where we were making COVID bubbles, and it was maybe our third or fourth bubble, and it was time to start tracking drums, for the album. And I remember all of us arriving, band arrived, our techs arrived, backline guys arrived, and the prevailing mood was, oh, so good to see you, so good to be with everyone, so good to be working. And, having had that held back from us and wanting to do that, it just built up that feeling of wanting to play together. It was like it was building and building. So when it came to like actually do the drum tracks and all of us playing together, right, and vibing together, I think there was a new level of appreciation there for each other, and a new level of appreciation for what we were doing. And I sincerely feel like, we're just that much more into it, like fucking 75% more into it, because we had no way of knowing whether or not that was our last bubble that we would ever have. We had no way of knowing, are we going to be here in the same sort of like situation next year as is this year, because people are dying, things are changing. The culture is just like in some weird chaotic sort of like sort of place. And so we were taking advantage of the fact that we were together. And man, I know that when we were playing together, I could feel the commitment. I could feel how loyal we all were to the music, And I really feel like when we were, during that time, we were really playing like every fucking note, every beat meant something, because at that point it really did, because there was no guarantee that we would be able to like come back and do the same thing. So now was the time to like really put down something that really meant something. And when I came in to do my leads, same sort of thing. I have all this pent up creative energy, and like frustration and anger and confusion, all the same stuff that everyone else has.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up your leads, because and I say this with no hint of obsequiousness at all. I think they're the best solos you've put on a record for probably 20 years at least. I think they're and I think the last solo on Enamorada is stunning. And I mean, I was told that you did that was the one, like you did it, and that was that.
Yeah.
And that you played a couple more, but that was the one.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much how all the leads were done. I just went in there and just improvised. But, leading up to that, I had to like really make sure that my chops were together. I was playing at a level that I was, felt confident with. I had a vision of what scales to play, what guitar licks to play. I had a whole vocabulary, that I was going to bring to this album of licks, and I repeat myself quite a bit, but that's intentional, because I wanted there to be a vocabulary. And this is like, this is my vocabulary I'm going to use for this album alone. And I just had a lot of, again, pent up energy and emotions from the lockdown, and I needed to get it all out. And you know, I got it out in one of the few ways I know to get it out, and that's just by fucking playing guitar.
I mean, it's interesting as well. I love that. I love that phrase, vocabulary, and I love the fact that you said it was your vocabulary for this record. I have to ask you, do you think that, I mean, given right before the pandemic, you know, you were, I mean, you told me this story. I can't remember if you mentioned it on your social media, but, you know, when you were warming up for the Peter Green show with, like, you know, legends, like, you know, there's Dave Gilmour and Pete Townsend popping over to your stack to kind of say, hello, mate, how are you? Like, hey, looking forward to this. Does that shift your vocabulary a little bit, even in terms of confidence? Like, talk about what that does to a guitar player who's already venerated within their genre, but then you've got these, you know, titans coming up and saying, dude, this is awesome. We talk about that and what that does to your vocabulary.
Well, I would just, it's just like, you know, I've spent like literally years, like, you know, getting into these people's guitar styles and you know, they're playing and trying to get into their musical heads, right? And, you know, I guess, you know, in the meantime, you know, I do this, and then I do, you know, and you know, I absorb it all, and then I do what I do. But in doing what I'm doing, little do I know that they are listening, you know, and it never occurred to me that, you know, these guys who mean so much to me are listening, you know, because I'm just playing for the bass, you know, our fan base. That's all I ever care about. You know, I don't care about, you know, I don't really think about whether Dave Gilmour is listening or not. But, you know, it just so happens that he's listening a lot more than I ever realized. And for these guys to come up to me and go, hey, how's it going? What are you doing? Listening, you know, it's huge, bro. It's a huge acknowledgement, you know. It's a vindication. And it just tells me that, you know, I'm on the right track. And also, it also tells me that you know, I must be doing the right thing, because, you know, these guys are people who inspired me, and if they're coming to me and like saying, you know, good job or whatever, that's great. Because what I want to do is I want to turn around and inspire people too. You know, that's part of the reason why I'm doing this, is because I want to inspire people to make great music. You know, that has nothing to do with us. Because, you know, inspiration is the future of music. And if I can contribute to the, you know, the future growth of contemporary music, and, you know, affect it to a way where I raise the quality of it, fuck yeah. And what I think is really happening too is, you know, these guys who were like, you know, heroes of mine, I think, you know, they have that same feeling, and then they recognize that that's what I'm doing too.
And again, that vocabulary word is so good. I mean, and you summed up very well how you got to have a vocabulary for this record that was maybe different to others. And I take from that when you say that, you know, you've had some repetition, but that was intentional because that was your vocabulary, suggests to me more confident in that vocabulary. If find a couple of words that can encapsulate what that vocabulary was. What was the emotional intention behind the solos and behind the playing? Was it simply the frustration coming out?
Frustration, anger, frustration, and just you know, wanting to you know, just like say fuck you to that anger and to that frustration, you know. And a lot of this stuff is fucking totally complete aggro. And, you know, I would show up to the studio not knowing what to play, and, you know, listening to the song, listening to the emotion of the song, the pulse of the song, and just feeling these emotions well up, you know, in my emotional center, and just channeling it, you know, it's just like and then afterwards going, God, I feel so much better now.
It's so interesting with this band, and it's always been the way. You know, the guitarists are the two, I think, probably most emotionally expressive people in the band. One of those
Because
emotional,
we're both basket cases.
well, yeah, one of those basket cases does it through his lyrics, and the other one does through channeling the moment through his guitar. Talk a little bit, if you will, about how you felt about your guitar partner's lyrics and reading where he was going with those and taking him what, you know, his journey was. I mean, somewhere in there, if you can reflect that off the man you've spent, you know, 3/4 of your life with, and the man you've gone through two, you know, pretty dodgy moments in the band with, in terms of, you know, 2001 and then, you know, 2019. How did it make you feel? Did you relate to what he was writing about? Do you relate to what he's writing about? How much does any of that influence the channeling that you do with the music when you sit down to play or stand up to play?
Well, when it comes to James's lyrics, I try not to single out any song or any individual lyric. I take it in as what's the overall sentiment, and you know, I pick up on that sentiment, and it's and it's really consistent, because usually the sentiment is very close to just like, you know, something I've experienced or am experiencing, because, you know, when it comes to James and I, mentally, we're both challenged, and sometimes we're challenged in a similar way. So sometimes when he's going through stuff, I can totally relate. And I feel like sometimes when I'm going through stuff, he can relate to me. And, you know, so we had this weird kind of like emotional connection that is in a place that, like, you know, we connect in a place that is not comfortable. It's not warm and fuzzy. It's actually a scary place, and a place that's super challenging and is dark. And we pretty much, you know, we're very similar in that we just like, that's the place we occupy, you know. And, you know, I distill it differently. He distillates differently. But that place is very, very similar. And so, I mean, it's very easy for me to relate to James pretty much all the time on those issues. And you know, I feel like he can relate to me a lot of times, you know, with my issues. And those issues are ongoing and continuous and consistent, you know, because it's just like, it's life for us. It's just life. And the recognition of it is important. And so, having said that, you know, when I hear you know, saying, you know, about certain things, I get the sentiment, and I get it, and I get like raw emotion. I get a gut feeling. I try not to dissect it, you know, or categorize it, or, you know, compartmentalize it. I see it as a certain raw emotion, and I go from there. And for me, it's doing that is pure, you know, and it feels honest, and it feels right, rather than, you know, picking up, you know, certain things here and there. No, I want to take it all in and kind of like, you know, get a global view of the raw emotion, you know, and the sentiment, and then take that in and connect it to what I feel, and then take it to a different place, you know, through my guitar playing. And that's something I've done for a long time now.
It feels like you're doing it with more confidence than you ever did before, though, on this project. Even talking now as we are about it, I've heard you talk lightly about this stuff before, but never with the fluidity and self, just confidence to express it that you are now. I mean, do you feel that is something that's happened in the last few years?
I've gotten better in just like expressing myself, talking about my feelings, you know, not being shy or about my feelings, or, you know, my biggest thing is withdrawal. And, you know, I will just withdraw from everyone and everything. I had that capacity to do that, you know, and it's not disassociation. It's really just like, you know, just wanting to just like withdraw from people because you know, it's too much, you know, and so I've recognized that I have that, and I've also recognized that it's just better for me to express what I really, truly feel all the time. And I've only come to this point after being sober for a few years. You know, I'm going on 9 years sober pretty soon. I contribute so much of my own personal growth to getting sober. And I wish I would have gotten sober a long time ago, but it just wasn't in the cards, you know? But since getting sober, everything has improved in my life. Pretty much everything has improved. I have focus, you know, and you know, just like I put myself in situations now that I know are positive and win-win situations where, you know, contributes to everyone else's well-being. And I know that, you know, the best thing that I can do nowadays is to find ways just to contribute to other people's well-being, whether it's through, you know, art, music, you know, just hanging out with people, you know, doing cool creative stuff, doing cool creative projects, connecting with people, being positive, and just working toward the well-being of everyone. That's what I want to do these days.
It is so interesting because I think, you know, for many years, and we've talked about this we've talked about this often in the past about like how this band is made up of sort of like obdurate pillars and rivers, right? And people, connections and flows and like buffers and pillars in the creative sense and in the group sense. And for many years, I think you and I talked about how much you probably put yourself in the position of being a river when Jason was in the band, you know, and being sort of like, I'll step in and buffer. Twofold here. I mean, obviously now you and Rob carry that, it seems share that load together, but more than any, am I right in saying that you're not particularly interested in being a buffer or anything anymore? It's like, you're just like, here I am, take me as you find me, this is who you get.
Yeah.
Do you not think that that's easier for the others as well, because they see a defined and like outwardly confident Kirk saying, hey, this is who I fucking am, and if you want me to be something else, it may not happen, so take it.
Well, you know, I mean, you know, it's just like I know that I'm not as chaotic as I used to be, and I know that I'm not as unpredictable as I used to be. You know, you know, when I was younger, I had, you know, I had this thing. It's just like I always had this feeling of like I needed adventure, you know, and I was mischievous. So, you know, I would get myself into trouble all the time, you know, only because I was just like, that was the energy that was in me, you know. But I mean, I don't have that anymore. And, you know, I feel like I'm very well grounded. And I also feel that, you know, I am my own person, and I will always be my own person. And, you know, everything that has anything to do with me begins with me and ends with me. And at the end of the day, really has to have anything to do with anyone else. And, you know, having that realization, you know, it's changed me. It's changed my approach to just about everything, you know. Yeah. It's given me an awareness so that, you know, I'm less reactive and more responsive to almost every situation. Whereas, you know, back in the day, I was a reactionary, emotional animal. Would just lash out all the time without even thinking, just lash out, because that's how I was conditioned, you know, and that was the situation around me as I was growing up. Those are my 72 seasons, you know, being in a totally reactive mode all the time, because I had to be that way, because that's what people need to be for survival. You know, during those 72 seasons, most of it was spent in survival mode for me. And, it gets tiring being in that mode. And, I found a way to just write myself out of that narrative and be my own person.
Yeah, that's.
And, I realized that's all I can do. That's all I can do.
Right.
And so that's what I do now.
Right. And it's funny, when you came in, you said, I play guitar all the time. I love playing guitar. I mean, it is the thing that it sounds to me like has dragged you through all of it, and being the consistent element and being the ballast, if you will, through all the emotional waves that have happened, right?
Yeah. I think, the great thing about being me at this time is like, I recognize things that I never recognized in the past. And it's important to recognize certain things in your life and give them respect, give them compassion, and give them credit, because I think people don't give themselves enough credit for a lot of the things that people do.
Pick a couple of things. Give me a couple of examples, if you would.
Of recognition?
Yeah, what you're just talking about, because it's very cool.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just I recognize that whatever happens in my life, I will just always be playing guitar. I will always be making music, because that's my calling. I recognize that, this is my universal calling, is just to play music. With or without anyone, this is what I do. And to me, the realization of that, and I realized this friggin' like maybe 10, 15 years ago, that this really was the only option I have in my life, was great. Because like, there's no questions about, am I doing, why am I doing this? It's just like, because to play music, to be in this industry, to be in a band, you have to commit, and you have to make so much personal sacrifice, and there's no guarantee of success, and you might get killed in the process, and that's what being in this business is like, and I can only say that now, looking back, because, 40 years ago, what I saw was a bunch of kids who were hungry, innocent, and had something to say, and had like energy. And we all started off like on the same sort of like page. But, because of the industry, because of the music, because of popularity, status, sex, drugs, rock and roll, not all of us made it to this point. Some people got fucking devoured and spit out. Some people just got devoured and like never came back. I got extremely affected by it. Other people in the band got extremely affected by it. I feel like I'm a fucking survivor, and I think that every one of us in this band is a survivor, because, man, it's a screwed up industry. And, my kids are really sensitive and shy. Like me. I wouldn't push them into this. I don't push my kids into music or, into going into this career. Because, I don't... Yeah, it's been amazing, This side is amazing, and everyone always sees this side, but you gotta friggin', be aware of this side too. And this side almost friggin' killed me. If I push my kids into this, there's no guarantee they're gonna have the same success as I am. And the other side of it, there's more of a guarantee of that happening. So I don't want that. I don't want my kids to be subject to that, The other guys' kids are different from my kids, And I think, Rob's kids and Ty in general, he's like a perfect example of a kid who's just like grown up in this business and already knows what he wants.
Yeah, I mean, that family is very unique.
And
they are a unique family of creative, artistic.
Yes.
That's what all of them do.
Yeah.
Chloe, Lou, I mean, they're kind of They're
Yeah.
very unique.
Yeah.
I mean, they really are.
And and he has the full support of of his family, Rob and Chloe, and that's great. When I started off, I didn't have the full support of my family, and I doubt if any the rest of us did. In fact, my mom hated it when she found out I was I was thinking of becoming a musician. Literally, she like yelled at me for 2 or 3 hours, saying, "What are you doing? Are you nuts?" And I was just like, you know. But it's also the recognition that you know, that culturally, I represent something. Every one of us represents something, and people need that. They need to like see someone and like and have that person mean something in their lives. That is super super important too, and that's another reason why I think that we should just never stop, because we bring meaning to people's lives. Fucking UFO Michael Schenker brought so much meaning to my life. It was just the band. It was just music. It was just entertainment, but friggin' hell, it was like a lifeline to me.
But it just sounds to me like your balance with all of it is probably in the most comfortable place it is for you to also get the maximum amount of personal and musicianal satisfaction, on the two counts.
Well, there's also yes, I know, I'll acknowledge that. But for me to even like get to that place, I had to take a step back. What am I doing in all this? Take a step back and think, yeah, what I have is really, really wonderful, and I do it, and I do it voluntarily,
Which is a very important thing for people to remember. Nobody
Yes,
forces the four of you to come together.
Yeah, we're all doing
you keep
this,
on doing it.
We all are doing this voluntarily, and no one's forcing us. No one's threatening us. We're all doing it voluntarily. But, I had to ask myself, if all of a sudden I was just by myself and had to do this, what would that be like? And would you be okay? Would I still be doing this? And would my heart still be in it? And the answer is yes. And it is as simple as that. If this all went away, would I still be doing this? Yeah. And, just the realization of that gave me immense freedom in the band. And I didn't need to talk to the three other guys, go, hey, blah, 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 blah. No, I arrived at this with my, my own deduction. And, I recognized my own space in this band and recognized that, it's all voluntary. And then recognize that, yeah, this is something that I want to do and I love doing it. And, no matter the situation, I'm just going to continue doing it because no one can stop me. It's my decision in life.
I mean, all of the intentions that you've expressed and all of the firm realities that exist for you playing right now and even creating. I mean, you said something earlier, which is, whoever I am, if the Riff to Enter Sandman's up there, it's going to be found. As you said, and as has been said by others, this record has a lot more collaborative components as opposed to others. I mean, you've got like several pretty strong riffs in that. And do you think that's all the result of what you're talking about? This underpinned strength that has helped you put out, stuff that is just easier for the others to access?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like I've just gotten better at just doing what I do. I still feel like I'm growing on my instrument. I still feel like I'm climbing the creative mountain and I haven't reached the peak yet. Still writing stuff, still creating, still curious about my instrument. It's just like it's still going on. It's still I still feel that that momentum behind me that's pushing me. It's stronger than ever now.
What have you learned in the last year about your playing and playing in general that has been a self-revelation? If you could pick one or two things, like what, you
Well,
know.
I think I spend a lot of time thinking about spiritual stuff. I'm a very spiritual person. I meditate, at least an hour a day. I spend a lot of time just reading philosophy, and I'm also into science too, and I like where science and religion meet, and I think that's a really interesting sort of like precipice, and so after just like years of like really reading philosophy, I've come to a few conclusions, and my conclusion is that all the music that has ever been written exists inside me. All the music that is ever going to be written exists inside me. And if I believe that, that means that I can access, all the music that has ever been written in the past, all the music that is going to be written in the future. If I can find a place and access that, and I believe I can, then in the moment, the possibilities are endless. And that's my approach. I sit and I bring my awareness, intense awareness, to the present moment, and I open myself up, and something happens.
What balance of being in that spiritual moment versus being that emotionally reactive moment is influencing or has influenced what you've been writing recently and what's been maybe picked up on 72 Seasons? I'm not sure it's easy to differentiate, but if you can, I'd be interested to know where the balance of your influence is coming from.
Well, I just maybe it's just like the best thing is, I think, is perspective. I can say, okay, that this I can connect this music to this thread, and this piece of music came from this thread of emotion and energy that I was feeling, and this piece of music came from that time when I just came out of meditation, and I was just like kind of like staring at some light, and then all of a sudden something tells me to grab my guitar, and I grab my guitar, and then all of a sudden something comes out. I mean, it's just like that happens so much for me all the time. And so, I mean, if anything, it's just like I have more perspective on, where things are coming from. Because music comes from all sorts of directions. It just doesn't always come from like one corner, one space. It comes from everywhere.
And let's flip to live for a second and stay on this track. When you're playing, and I presume you're going to be playing 72 Seasons live, the song. I mean, I'm sure you're going to have to tackle that beast. It makes sense. When you will be playing that night after night, I mean, I'm asking you to foretell something that you haven't experienced, but will you draw, as you're playing the leads, as you're playing that riff, will you draw off what created that riff, or will you draw off what the air's like in Amsterdam, what the air's like in Paris, how you're feeling in Hamburg? Like, what's the driver when you're playing these songs live?
Well, when I was younger, I would always pull from the past. Oh, I remember that thing, that I did, or oh yeah, I remember hearing that one thing that Michael Schenker did, or that there's that one recording, off that one album. When I pull from the past, it doesn't work. I need to just be present and in the future, and then come up with something, and then usually that fits. And the process of creating always involves being in the now, and being creative frees me up from the past. It cuts any sort of chains that are binding me from the past. Being creative and creating something in the moment, it just pushes you farther down the line, and it frees you up from the past. No one wants to be chained to the past. It's a bummer. You know, everyone's just like everyone. Well, I don't know if everyone, but I know that the most exciting moment that I can ever experience is right now. I don't want to live in the past. Some gentle Tulse sentiment. I don't even know what the future is, and and that kind of sucks because you go online and you'll find like 3 million people who claim to know what the future is. Yeah, well, tomorrow this is what's going to happen. Like next week we got to do this because really? It's just like, what's your line of information? Because it's just like that's not a line of information I know about. But I mean, again, it's just all about being in the moment, man.
That's pretty exciting for people coming to these shows because they really, this is not going to be, even if the notes and the riffs are what they are, they're not getting the same energy and performance. They're going to get what you're feeling at that moment.
Absolutely.
And given that, which is huge.
Yeah. And it's like the leads on this album are just, and I know this pisses people off, but mostly they're just markers for where the solos should be. And in Amsterdam, I'm going to be jet lagged, I'm going to be on that fucking stage. I'm going to be looking at this enormous fucking stage, an enormous crowd of fucking faces who are just going, fuck yeah. And that the combination of being jet lagged, which makes me loopy, and that energy, of being in front of our audience, and that injection of fresh song energy, man, I could end up anywhere, and
It's very exciting to hear.
Yeah,
right?
and you know what?
Great.
I won't know until we get to Amsterdam and I come to that point and I play whatever I play. And it's going to be a surprise to me and everyone else. And I think that's a beautiful thing rather than getting a pre-packaged thing that you just know what's going to happen. You've heard it like 40,000 times before and it sounds just like the album. Yay! People are into it, but I'm not that into it these days.
That's fantastic. I'm excited. And I look, just to say that as you're playing those solos, by the way, this has to be said, I think. I mean, you are, when I look at you play live, actually, generally when I see you walk around, but when I look at you play live, you look like you're actually enjoying being a lead guitarist and you're enjoying kind of being a rock star. Like, not in a wanky, like, sort of like prima donna way, but like, just very naturally. I mean, you always show up with some fineries on, and you kind of walk it, and you kind of got the tan, and you kind of got the glow. It looks like you're having fun. And so if we add this into it, it's like, wow.
Okay, can I let you in on a little secret?
Please.
I love what I do. I love what I fucking do. Okay, there's been times when it, the negative aspects have totally taken over me, and I've spent a lot of time, highlighting those negative aspects. But don't get me wrong, the positives still outweigh the negatives, and I love what I do. Basically, it's getting up there and playing guitar for people and showing them a good time. Because when I'm up there, I'm having a really good time. And ever since I was a kid, I thought, well, if I'm up there having a good time and people see me having a good time, they're going to pick up on that good time and have a good time too. And I learned that when I was 17 years old, when we first started playing shows in Exodus. And you know what? I believe that. I believed it then, and I believe it now. And yes, I'm having a great time up there because I'm playing guitar. I'm playing good songs that are fun to play. We write songs that are fun to play because that's what we want to do. We don't want to write songs that are a bummer to play. Fuck that. I'd get bored. I'd probably fall asleep or walk off stage or just start soloing in an inappropriate manner. I'm good at that. But no, that isn't the case. We have killer songs. I'm playing with killer musicians. They're my bros. we have an amazing fan base who understands us and then some. Actually, you know, they demand so much from us. But yeah, I still love it. And I love the fact that we can get into a big room, 50,000 people, and everyone, when we play a song, is in the same focus and the same awareness and the same presence of mind on the same thing. And we feel connected, you know, and to feel connected, all of us, 50,000 people, you know, in a song, that feeling of just like community, you know, that's the feeling. That's what you're really feeling when you go to a rock show. It isn't elation from seeing the band. It's elation from celebrating the fact that we're all together, seeing something that we all love and experiencing something that we all want to do together. Huge, huge, powerful stuff, man. And, you know, to be in that situation and, you know, to be in the room is huge. And then to be at like the forefront of it and guiding it and supplying it, you know, and steering it, it's magic, man. It's, you know what it is? It's pure love. LOVE.